We are live, all Burgundy and Gold, everything with the urban sports scene. Post game, Washington football team show. Tough loss today. Fox Sports Radio 1340 AM, 96.9 FM, Hopewell, Virginia. Ray and Glenn are your hosts. Washington football team drops a tough one to the Philadelphia Eagles, 20-16. Glenn, prior to coming on live, brother, you already mentioned the name Scott Turner. Go ahead and get the show kicked off with your thoughts about how this game turned out and what you expect moving forward as we get closer to the offseason.
Man, I'm gonna tell you what I thought. I thought this team coming in this game with guys being a little bit more healthier, that they would had a good game. They came out fast, they came out hard, put up some points. Again, had some red zone issues, not being able to score touchdowns in the red zone. I think that's one of the biggest issues with this team. Also, I did not like I said Scott Turner in before we came on. Second half to me, it was too much misdirection. They tried to do a little too much. You're doing too much. Do what you do. Run the football. You're only down by 2. Don't need to give Philadelphia the ball that quick. I mean, the biggest thing to me was when Philadelphia came out and scored the touchdown right out of halftime, Washington gave the ball back on 3 plays. Didn't have time. The defense did not have time to really rest in the second half, and we saw that. We saw that in the Philadelphia running game start to wear them down. Different from the first half where they was able to get the offense was able to sustain drives and keep the defense fresh. Second half was not able to do that, and I think that's one of the biggest things that hurt this Washington team in the second half.
Well, I'm glad you got it started. We're expecting 2 guests, of course, 2 star-studded guests. Hopefully, Big Doug is in the building. He is the creator and host of the Big Douglas Show, a fast rising show on all your pod platforms. What's up, Big Doug? We're getting it started. Of course, you can find this show also on Fox Sports Radio 96.9 FM and 1340 AM, Hopewell, Virginia's Facebook and YouTube page, and on Twitter at 1340 AM Fox Sports. Also, the Urban Sports Scene Facebook page and Urban Sports Scene Twitter feed at Urban Sports Scene. You can check out this post-game show. Doug, we got Glenn's initial reaction. We're still waiting on Kelsey Nelson to join us as well. But, Doug, we're going to get your thoughts. Tough loss, getting ready for the offseason now. What's your initial reaction to this game?
It was the story of the whole season in one game, right? I mean, that first half was the best of everything Washington had to offer. And the second half was everything that frustrates you about the team, right?
Okay, so my man Glenn just took a shot at your boy. I always say your boy, Scott Turner. Last week after that debacle in Dallas, there were many comments on Twitter saying one coordinator has to go. It's either going to be Jack or it's going to be Scott. Do you feel that way, or do you feel as though we need to give one more year for this group, this coaching staff, to get it together and finally put together a winning product, considering all the issues they've had lately off the field? Of course, COVID factors into that as well.
Yeah, I would have originally thought that maybe Jack be gone. Scott's not going anywhere. I mean, my bias aside, and that's well documented, the league knows who and what Scott Turner is and what the offense could be. I mean, I always say, right, there are reasons and there are excuses. There are reasons why the offense just isn't what they had hoped that it would be. You know what I mean? And so I think he definitely says it's only year 2 for him calling plays. Don't be shocked when he gets a couple of head coaching interviews this year. Not that he's going to get one, but he's going to be in the building because I think people understand what the offense could be. Jack, I think he'll be back just because I'm not sure how you upgrade it. I mean, it is what they want to do. They need more talent. I think we can put to rest the idea that they didn't miss the 2 premier DNs, right? I mean, I got bashed over the head with how the defense was better when they're not on the field. I think maybe we can stop talking about that. So I actually think there's a better chance that both coordinators are back next year.
I would not disagree with that. So let me ask you both. What was your thoughts coming into this game? There was still some hope, a glimmer of hope, some outside hope, however you want to frame it, that this team could possibly get this W. Philly, go to Dallas next week and lose, and you still have a chance at the postseason. That's now gone. Did you have that hope? And now what are your thoughts about next week? What do you do against the Giants? Do you still play your starters? Do you, again, start to prepare for the offseason? What's your mindset if you are making decisions in Washington? And, again, like I said, what was your thought going into the game, and now what is it?
Well, my thoughts going into the game was that this team needed to win. I didn't care. I'm not even talking about playoffs. You know what I'm saying? Who cares about the playoffs? I just think this team needed a W. Coming off of last week's primetime loss and the way they lost, they just needed to win. They needed to look good. They needed to look good for the fan base. We already knew that wasn't going to be any Washington fans in the building anyway because the Philadelphia Eagles was coming. So we already knew that it was going to be, more Eagles fans there. But I think this team needed to just to show that, what they can play. A lot of guys needed to showcase themselves. Taylor Heineke needed to show. Some receivers need to show up. Do you bench people for next week? Heck no. You let them guys play. You play your staff because at the end of the day, Ron Rivera has not had a winning record since he's been the head coach of the Washington football team. He has been an NFC East champion, but that's 7-9. Still ain't a winning record. So guess what? What you do is you see what you have, see what you can get away with, see who you need, who you don't need. It's a evaluation period. So, but you let everybody that's able to play, they need to play.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how many of them are healthy. I mean, I can't imagine they're going to let too many of these guys play. It'll be more young guys. Was there a reason? Does anybody know why Jamin Davis didn't play today? I mean, I guess he started playing in the second half, but I was surprised that there was a whole lot of David Mayo today, which can't be a good thing. But yeah, I mean, those will be the guys you'll see more of. Corn Elder next week, probably. A lot of Jarrett Patterson. I can't believe they'll have. What's the point of having guys like Gibson play? Did you notice that Gibson didn't play today? Was that just me?
He's on IR, right?
He's on IR today.
What I'm saying is, did the running game look any different with him out of the game today? I was a little.
You know what, Doug? It did look a little bit different because Patterson didn't put the ball on the ground.
Oh, shots.
That's
okay.
True. That's
Glenn, you sound like a frustrated fan, brother. Here's the thing.
No, not a frustrated fan, just a realist, man. Anthony Gibson has fumble issues. Patterson looks like a true running back. Gibson has not made the transfer yet from a wide receiver to a running back. Just some of the simple mistakes he was saying. I've been saying it for weeks. He has that transition has come real slow, and you have guys like Patterson who've been playing a running back position for years, and you can see the knowledge over Antonio Gibson. There's no shot.
Keeping it real. You're a coach too, so I respect it.
I've actually said this for a couple of weeks now. Antonio Gibson's touches don't need to decrease next year, but they need to change, right? Like, I mean, he needs to be in the slot more. They need to be moving him around. He needs to catch more passes than he does gut runs. And he said it himself a couple of weeks ago. He didn't have that many rushes in college. And as a wide receiver, you're used to like two guys slapping at the ball. When you're running up the middle, you've got 7 guys, all of them with humongous hands and over 250 pounds smashing on the balls. But to your point, Glenn, he has not made the transition the way I think he thought they would.
All right, fellas, I appreciate it. And right now we are joined by award-winning sports reporter and host of Listen In with K&N, Kelsey. Glad you could join us. Let's get your thoughts. Your just initial reaction on this Washington football team loss to Philly. Season's over now. It's official.
I know. Well, first off, thank you so much for having me, fellas. Like, this is not the way you want to join the show with the playoff hopes just shot. We knew how big this game was, But I think I look at the first half, and I think we thought there was hope. This looked like a completely different team than we saw in Dallas, and it really was the tale of two halves. When we see the second half, the Eagles get the momentum, and the Eagles come out stronger, and it just hurt. It just really hurt. And so I think for the Washington football team, there were some glimpses, some promises of people that you would like to see, of course, continue with this football team. But then also I think you see the work that needs to be done. This is a Washington football team, folks, that almost gave up 1,000 yards against Philadelphia, right? Over 520 yards the last time they played them. And then against Dallas, 497 yards. That's embarrassing. So finally today, just when you thought things were going, well, Philadelphia Eagles, they wanted it more. They played like it more. And I think Taylor Heineke especially answered a lot of folks' questions about if he really is the future in Washington at the quarterback position. I think from what we saw today, again, I think he's a solid backup, but not the guy that Washington needs going forward. So now we're just playing for fun and seeing who wants to make sure they keep a spot next year. But it was hurtful. Washington knew what was going into this game. Fans obviously had given up on this team. I think it was kind of embarrassing once again to see so many Eagles fans in Landover, Maryland, but just a lot to decompose from. But yeah, it was a hurtful one, especially after riding so high last season with this Washington football team.
Oh, we're not surprised that it was Philly fans packing the stadium.
I know.
That's been for years.
We do better. We got to do better.
No shocker there. I don't know how you're going to change that experience unless you move the team back to the district, but that's not going to happen just yet. Big offseason coming. We're going to get there because, We're looking at a new name, possibly. Ownership is in flux. Hopefully, no more stories, bad stories come out about the team. But real quick, Doug, when you started the show up, you said everything you love about this team you saw in the first half. Kelsey, I just want to hear, what did you like about the Washington football team performance? In spite of the loss, what did you think that they did well?
Yeah, sorry I missed the first half of the combo, but I think what we saw in the first half was the ball was being moved around very well. Different receivers getting open, tight ends getting open. That's what we wanted to see. And also, I thought we saw a quick scoring drive, that first drive for Washington getting in the end zone. So I thought that's when things were going well. And then also, folks, when you have 4 possessions and you score each of those 4 times, that's a great thing for your offense. So I think I saw a confidence. And Taylor Heinicke looked pretty comfortable in the pocket. And he looked comfortable scrambling. Like, that's what I wanted to see. But then coming out the second half, I don't know what was said in the locker room, but it must not have been motivational enough, because it's like a completely different team coming out of that locker room, and you just wish you would have saw more. So again, I think I agree with Doug. The first half was the Washington football team that we love. That's the Burgundy and Gold that we're proud to rep. And the second half, I mean, you just wanted so much more from this team. And again, now we're just playing for fun, folks, because the playoff hopes, like a little chance that we have now. So yeah.
That glimmer of hope. Doug, what did you like, brother?
Yeah, I mean, they played with more up-tempo in the first half. They distributed the ball around. They fought on offense. I'm with Kelsey. I think you saw what Heinicke is. He's a guy that are going to throw these 50-50 balls, and when done well, you're excited, and when they're not, then you're disappointed. They tried to stick with the run game. I'm not sure what happened. I'm with you that whatever they said at halftime was the opposite of what they needed to hear, because it was lackluster in the second half. But distributing the ball is what Heinicke does, moving around and doing off script plays. I mean, that's what he's good at. It just it wasn't. They have to be too perfect to win ball games is the problem.
Yeah. But also the defense, we should shut out the first half, because 47 rushing yards for an Eagles team that is leading the league in rushing yards. So again, that first half, I think both sides of the football were playing really quality football. But the second half, the Philadelphia Eagles looked like the Philadelphia Eagles team that we knew, and the Philadelphia Eagles team that we saw just 12 days ago up in Philadelphia. So again, I think, Doug, we needed a little like earpiece in that locker room halftime, because obviously, Doug, they needed one of our voices to somehow get things going in that second half.
And no punts. It's tough too, because no punts in the first half, and that's the point total you got. You know what I mean? So it's like everything has to go perfect for them, and it's just a hard recipe to win ball games that way.
So what are you guys' feelings on Ron? Is that an indictment on him coming out of halftime? Your team is flat. Last week, people were killing his demeanor on the sideline in Dallas. Is he the motivating guy that you need as head coach? Again, he's going to get another year. Losing record for the second straight season. Where are you guys at with Coach Rivera? Glenn, go ahead, jump in, bro.
I think Ron is moving in the right direction. I think with this team, but at the same time, there's a lot of pieces in places. There are a lot of pieces not in place. You talk about a team coming out of flat at halftime. That's not a coach. I am a coach. That's not a coach. That's players. That's players. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned it earlier. You can do all the rah-rah speeches you want to. That don't mean a hill of beans. These grown men who are professionals, and you got to come out and play. I think at the end of the day, this defense got tired. And I mentioned it earlier. I think whether it was online or before the hand, this defense got tired because the defense wasn't able to get off the field as they did in the first half. When you have a defense that's not able to get off the field, they get tired. And the rushing game for Philadelphia picked up. If you look at some of the things that happened in this defense in the second half, it was tiredness. There was some times where they was coming down the line and they missed a receiver with some missed tackles, or they missed the running back with missed tackles, or their legs got tired. And so what happened is the Washington football team needed to find some depth, and they're missing some of the key defensive players. And so do you blame Ron Rivera? A little bit, yeah, because you didn't draft well, or you didn't have the defensive players on your team for good backup. We didn't have the depth that they needed to move on. And so that's what the biggest indictment is for him. They didn't have the depth. If you look at the games that Washington has lost in the last few weeks, it has become depth. Whether your kids have COVID players or not, next guy needs to step up and be ready to play. And so we saw that they wasn't ready to step up and play.
Yeah, I would say I completely agree with Glenn. I think that second half we saw the Philadelphia Eagles control the time of possession. And as far as it goes to Riverboat Ron, honestly, it depends on who you're talking to. It just does. I think many fans right now are just feeling frustrated. You talked about the sideline antics last week. And for me, I would love a coach to kind of step in and be like, no, this is unacceptable. It's unacceptable because we are grown men playing football, and this is a very important game. But yes, the Glenn points, these are grown men. But I think honestly, what I think we're missing in Washington, and for someone who covered the Baltimore Ravens for a long time, I miss these leaders that we used to have in the locker rooms. I miss the Ray Lewises, Joe Suggs, the Ed Reeds that would get in your face after a play and come tell you man to man, and you wouldn't try to retaliate. Unfortunately, we saw that today happen with Jalen Ramsey in the game. And right now, quite frankly, it's getting embarrassing with some of these football players. What's happening when instead they need to be putting in this attention and this anger and this aggression on the football field. And I think Ron Rivera has done pretty much all that he can do in his head coaching position in terms of trying to lead this team. Last year, Ron Rivera really was the story, fighting cancer, beating cancer. And I think the team really playing for him. And this year, the team knew they had to play for adversity. And this is a Washington football team that not only is Ron fighting battles on the football field with his players, he's fighting the noise around this Washington football team, from the ownership levels, from the sad events that have happened with his team and some of the teammates on this team in recent weeks. So he's trying to fight all that, but also still trying to win games. But mind you, folks, cancer can come back. And he's also trying to keep his health. And he's also trying to keep this team together and was trying to keep them in the playoff push and hunt. So I think Ron Rivera, I don't think this is an indictment on him. I think Ron Rivera is probably the more serious coach that we've seen in Washington. When he came to Washington, he talked about leadership and accountability. And we've seen a lot more of that than we have seen with recent head coaches in Washington. And we see really he's giving guys a chance. If you step up and make plays, you will be playing football in Washington. So I think we want to see more, but it really is going to come down to the guys on this roster to help make the change that's needed. But as far as a head coaching standpoint, again, we have to look at this defense, who at the beginning of the season, this was supposed to be the league's best defense. And folks, this is not the league's best defense right now that the Washington football team is boosting. And then also on the quarterback side and on the offensive side, is this a head coach that can really help get us a veteran quarterback here to feed these young receivers and tight ends that the Washington football team has?
Well, you gotta tip your cap to him for what he's done, but it comes down to wins and losses, and they have not been winning, and they've not been good enough. And averaging 17 points a game is not good enough. But it's tough because we talk about depth and whether they have it. Well, we're finding out, but the depth is so far down the depth chart. We've got the fourth string center that's out there. Good luck figuring out who the D end is. William Jackson III did not play again. Landon Collins did not play again. So, the right tackle doesn't play again. We're down to the third string left guard now. Did you have Sadiq Charles starting at guard when the season started? Probably not. You know what the bright spot is I love today? 87 John Bates has been a revelation the last 4 games, and they should be excited about him. And Cole Holcomb on defense is something to be excited about. The rest of the linebacker core has got a lot of work to do. So we'll see what happens there. But I don't know. When we're talking about the head coach, I'm with you. He's got 2 more years, definitely. But it hasn't been great.
George Templeton, of course, he just had a comment. He said, if you think progress has been made under Ron Rivera, you're talking out of your hat. Listen, he's already declaring, what is it? No, it's 6-10 is the record now. I keep forgetting it's 17 games. But Kelsey, you mentioned something, and it speaks to culture. It really does in terms of players being motivated and there being leaders in the locker room. The culture change has been much more difficult for Ron, and he's acknowledged that. And it's a hard franchise to come into to change a culture. Again, because the negative stories just continue to trickle in, and just the off-the-field stuff. Of course, Montez Sweat is going through something serious off the field. DeShazer. It's really difficult to put into words just how to manage those incidents, let alone the on-the-field issues. Deron Payne, I don't know if you saw his IG activity, cleared all his Washington football team stuff this past week. You guys, I don't know if we could say anything else about this game, but I'm telling you, going into this offseason, I don't know what the number one priority is going to be. But for me, it's you got to find a franchise quarterback. Without that, it's going to be hard to succeed in the NFL and have sustained success, longevity. But I want to hear what you all think now that, hey, the glimmer of hope is gone for the playoffs. So what are you all thinking is the number one priority? Forget the name change. Forget the front office. We already know who's there. We already know who's on the coaching staff. What's the number one priority going into the offseason if you all are running this team? I know what it will be for Big Doug. Kelsey, go ahead. You can get us started.
Now I'm curious what Doug has to say.
Oh, go ahead, Doug.
I'm actually really glad, though, Doug, too, that you pointed out John Bates. I think he's been, I feel like you said, fantastic the last couple of weeks. He's had that heart that I've needed to see, even when the team is down, especially in that Dallas game, the second half, when your team is getting whooped. I like to see what John Bates was doing. You talked about Cole Holcomb. I think he's not been getting enough praise for what he's also been able to do on the defensive side of the football. But, Doug, I'll let you start.
Doug is the forever optimist. That's why I love Doug.
I've said all along, I think this what the coaching staff hopes to do is follow the Tom Brady situation, maybe like a Matt Ryan that you can slide in. Veteran, definitely for 2 years. He can't afford to do the traditional rebuild because he already decided he wasn't going to do that. People wanted it, but Ron said it's funny. He had an opportunity to do this twice, right? So the first time they drafted Cam Newton 1 overall, and he's already said that the goal here is to build a roster and insert quarterback. Well, that roster ain't ready for a rookie quarterback yet. I just don't see it. And I don't think he's got 2 years to sort it out. So what they need to do is nail a draft, because I'm not sure they nailed the last one. You know what I mean? Like, that was not a good draft for them last year. And I know drafts aren't to be made in 1 year, but one great. And so they're going to to me, that's the big key. And I think you're wrong. I think the name change really is one of the bigger things going, because then you get to settle the team down some, get to settle the organization down now. Now you get to promote whatever that is and change it in a different direction. The narrative changes in the offseason. People will forget this season and focus on the future when you present the new name. But I'm telling you, if it's not Fitzpatrick again or another year of Heineke or Allen or Matt Ryan, I know people don't want to hear that, Jameis Winston, but I can tell you it's not, Kenny Pickett or Matt Corral. I'd be stunned if it was somebody like that.
Yeah. I think Doug hit on so many points. I think you do have to look at the quarterback position because, again, Washington has these young receivers that we need to be able to get the ball to. This year we tried it with the veteran, right? Nobody could have foresaw what happened to Fitzpatrick, especially game one. It was a series of unfortunate events. But, we've seen, I think, the liabilities and capabilities of Taylor Heineke. And, again, he's good as a backup quarterback. But right now, Washington needs someone to lead. Doug, you talked about it. There's not 2 years to wait here. We're not going to go through another project. We tried to go through a project with Dwayne Haskins. Well, Dwayne Haskins is no longer on this roster. And as we all know, if you're a watching football team fan, probably for a very good reason. And right now, Pittsburgh isn't even considering him as the future of the Pittsburgh Steelers. When you get a new rookie quarterback in, I think you have to think about going through the project of a rebuild. And how long does Washington have? Well, not long at all, because you look at this Dallas team. Dallas has only gotten better in the NFC East. And you look at this Philadelphia Eagles team that Washington just played, also getting better in the NFC East. So time is of the essence. It's a luxury right now. And so I think Washington has to look at bringing a proven leader in here. Again, Ryan Fitzpatrick was supposed to be it. Didn't work out, but I think you go that route again and get a veteran in here who you think can change the tides of things that are happening. It's just
don't drink the Kool-Aid, Kelsey. Do not drink the Big Doug Kool-Aid. I'm telling you, a young quarterback is needed, or Deshaun Watson. We all had that discussion.
I would love Deshaun, depending on his the legal essence of whatever happens with him. Deshaun would be, I think, great here in Washington.
The legal issues is just Houston Texans just don't want him to play. You know what I'm saying? I mean, if there was really any legality or anything proven with the Deshaun Watson situation, in my belief, it would already happen by now. So I think that's the case. But what Washington really needs, they do need a quarterback. I don't think they need a French. I don't think they need a veteran. They need somebody. They need a decent quarterback who can manage. But they need an offensive line. We didn't see anything this year. We saw that the Washington football team offensive line is not that great, because how many times did we see Heineke run for his life? Right? How many times did Heineke make plays with his feet because there was offensive line breakdowns? And because we had a mobile running back, mobile quarterback, he bailed the offensive line out several times with his feet. And so I think the offensive line is in trouble. When you have guys like Morgan Moses and other guys wanting to get out of town, you can know that the offensive line is in trouble. What I think also, they need a running back. I mean, let's be honest. I know people like Antonio Gibson. He's not the guy, and not that I don't like Antonio Gibson, but he is not the guy. And Washington has been struggling with running backs for the last several years to have running backs in here in Washington. So they need a running back. They need a running back. They need a quarterback, and they need help on the offensive line. This offense is in shambles. But again, go back to what George said. This team is 1-5 in the division. Truth be told, if it had not been for a penalty, this team is 0-6. If you go back to the Giant game, all right. So this team is 0-6. We do not go back to the Giant game in the division. So the Washington football team needs much more than a quarterback to make them a viable threat next year.
Okay, let's talk regrets real quick. It's the end of the season. You know how we do. Brand new year. You guys regret the team not trading up to get Micah Parsons. Y'all agree with that or not?
I mean, Micah Parsons would be on everyone's wish list with what we've seen from him now, of course. But I mean, I think we talked about the biggest priorities, of course, that Washington needs. I think Glenn brings up a great point with the offensive line. But again, we also have to think about Washington as a destination spot and who really wants to come here and play for Washington. I have to bring that up again because Washington talk of so many different headlines right now. And does anybody want to really come to this and what we have brewing in Washington? Our owner seems to be in the news every other week with something happening right now. And then, of course, you see what's the unfortunate events happening with the Washington football team right now. Doug, we'll see what this name change is, because I think, to your point, it's going to be a big topic of conversation since we're experiencing that soon. But to your point, I mean, I think there's a lot of different things that we could point to regrets to. Michael Parsons, again, he's great, but I think we knew he would be really good. Did anybody foresee how great he has been? And Dallas is obviously very lucky to have him. I think right now I'm looking at your priorities in the Washington football team in the draft. I'm again looking at the pieces that they have and trying to prepare for the future. It just is what it is. Washington right now has not done a great job preparing for the future, and that's why this team unfortunately has been on the losing side of the football.
I like Sam Cosmi. I like De'Ami Brown still. Again, Curtis Samuel did not turn out to be what we thought he was. So there's some names out there. Malik Willis, Liberty quarterback. Shout out to my man Wilt T. He put his name out there as an electrifying guy who can maybe come and energize your franchise. Young guy, maybe he could sit behind a veteran QB. But my man Cam Mingo chimed in. He said quarterback is the number one priority. I think we all agree there. Big Doug, you by yourself with the name change, whether it's Red Wolves, Red Foxes, whatever, Red Tails.
Leave it as the Washington.
It's all about wins and losses, like you said, my man. So that's what it comes down to. People want to see a winner. A lot to digest from this season. I guess you all on your own platforms will discuss this year, kind of do a review, the Sean Taylor tribute that did not go as planned. So much did not go well for this team. The winning streak was dope, though. Everybody forgot about those stories. So winning does matter. And to me, it starts with a franchise quarterback. But we got a few minutes left. We're not going to stay on here long, guys. Going to New York next week, Glenn already put his thoughts out there. You play your starters. You play to win. You see what you have going into the offseason. Kelsey, Doug, would you all agree with that? And what are you expecting from this last game? Will you be tuning in? Doug, you're a Georgia fan. You hoping they beat Alabama. That's more important than Washington football right now, I'm sure.
It is right now.
But still, Washington, Kelsey, you already know. You grew up here. Doug, I don't know where you grew up. I know where you live now. But this team is so much more than what it's being presented as right now. I mean, this is still a historic franchise. It's still dope to relive the glory days. And somehow, some way, got to get back to that. I predicted at the end of the year that Dan Snyder would no longer be the owner by the end of 2022. Maybe that's the change that's needed. So going into next week, what are your thoughts in terms of this last division game? New York is not playing for anything either. What do you think?
Well, I mean, I grew up in the DMV, and I remember getting Redskins cards in elementary school. So it's important to the area, you know?
Absolutely.
It relies, but unfortunately, it relies on those of us that are old enough to remember some good days, and how they changed. I don't even know. They tried so many different ways, right? I mean, you've had Shanahan in here. Jay Gruden was not terrible, but he was not good enough to be a head coach. You know, we tried a bunch of different routes here. We tried it the Ron Rivera route, and I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. The answer is not Dan Snyder signing to. I mean, that's not. If that happens, great. I don't see it happening. If something was in there, they would have already found it or gotten it. So, and there's only about 3 or 4 things on that checklist, that get you booted out of ownership from an NFL team. And I don't think he's checked the racist, homophobe boxes yet. That's kind of where you're at, that you got to get out of this thing. So, and frankly, what has he done this year that has affected the play on the field, I'll ask? You know what I mean? Like, I understand it's easy to pile on to Dan Snyder, and Lord knows he's deserved it, but he hadn't done anything that's affected the play on the field this year, and it ain't been good enough.
I agree with Doug, man. I think Dan Snyder's a scapegoat. People like to use Dan Snyder.
An easy one.
Yeah. Easy scapegoat, because again, he doesn't suit up, he doesn't play. Everybody was happy with the hires he made with Ron Rivera and people in management. He has cleaned up the front office a little bit and gotten some things straight. Some of the stories that are coming out are old stories, and people that are not even with Washington anymore, with some of these things that came out. So yeah, their name's still in the news for bad stuff, but the people that's there are not even long with the organization. So I think the organization is moving in the right direction. Again, we want to win too soon. And what it is, a rebuild has to take time. And let's be honest, when Ron Rivera took this team over, he had to rebuild. He had to get some players out of town. He had to bring some new players in. And he's in the second year of rebuild. And would we really had high hopes for this Washington team if they had not been 7-9 and won a division? If Dak Prescott doesn't get hurt, are we really looking at this Washington team and saying, oh, they're division champions? I think
it's a great point. It escalated the rebuild. There's no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, I think when we look at the rebuild, yes, if you grew up in this area, you've known how people feel towards Dan Snyder. It's no secret. You can go on social media and go see this, and we all have DMV connects here. And yeah, I think when people look, when you're losing, people do have to point the finger at somebody. So I agree to that point. But I also, again, think culture is big. And I think about the teams who have been winning as of recent. I can look across the highway, look at Baltimore, and look at Steve Biscotti. I don't see him in all this mess. In Baltimore, for the most part, and Baltimore without injuries, barring, and COVID barring, they've been a whole different organization, and it's a place that guys have taken pay cuts to go to. They want to play on that team. They talk about what it's like practicing in the castle and what it's like John Harbaugh. So I do think culture does play a large part into that. But all that to say, when you look at this Washington football team again, yes, we can look at what Washington football team has done, and I'll give them some strides. Jennifer King being on that coaching staff and what she means for women in football and women in sports, that was a positive. You look at someone like Jason Wright and what it meant to have a Black team president finally in the National Football League. So there have been some positives, but I'm also not going to negate any of the stories. I don't care how long ago they are, because to me, everyone needs to have a platform to say whatever happened to them happened to them. I'm never going to tell anybody to dim their light and not tell their stories, especially now that we're living in a time where I think women are finally being heard to and listened to. But all that to say, the Washington football team, look, Doug, you talked about the glory days of Washington. And I remember it when I was real small, but also we have a 30 and under crowd in Washington, D.C., a Washingtonian that don't even remember what it was like for this football team to be good. They got to pull out the DVDs and the VHSs, or go on NFL Network and find those old games. And I say that to say, again, we have to change the culture and we need to bring back winning ways to Washington. I also could care less what the name is. I also think it probably will say Washington football team, because it's probably the best way to be uncontroversial with whatever the new name should be. Just keeping it simple and stupid, like my coach used to say. So, I think the biggest thing is this team finding an identity, and identity comes with winning ways, and that's what we want to get back to. So Washington, they have a lot of work to do. I'm still not going to excuse the sideline antics, because what we saw last week, that was a boil over of frustrations. You talked about what Deron Payne did on the IG. These young guys like Instagram, and let me tell you, they put all their thoughts and emotions on the IG.
Yeah,
Again, so much frustration happening here in Washington, but again, it has to get back to the field of play. But also, I think that leadership in Washington. I'm also not going to dismiss what Alex Smith said about this team and how his injury was handled. So again, I think there's been, unfortunately, some bad things that have happened that you can't just slide under the rug. Washington has to get it right, both on and off the football field. If one, they want to make Washington a destination place that players actually want to go to, and two, if it's a place that players actually think that they can win. And right now, if I'm a player and I'm looking at free agency, is Washington a place that I want to go to if I think you can have success? And right now, again, in the NFC East, you're looking at Dallas, and you're looking even at the Eagles, and you're looking at Washington, and I think you're scratching your head, because you have a lot of questions about this team. And I think many of us just don't know the true identity of this team. So I think a lot has to happen. And Ron Rivera is on a clock right now to make some more positive changes in Washington and get this team back to winning ways in Washington.
We got a comment. Sam Howell, quarterback, UNC. Doug, what do you think about that as a possibility for a draft pick? I already know where you stand.
If a guy like that get us in the second round, I could see that. I'm just telling you, I don't see quarterback in round one. I don't see it. Which then is kind of the old, if you're going to kick it to the second round, then you might as well kick the can down the road a whole season, unless you're in the third or fourth round with a guy that maybe you think in 2 years you like better than you do now. But it's interesting, Kelsey, as you were talking. It's funny if you think back before the season, just 8 months ago, this was like one of the most progressive franchises in the league with their hiring practices. The problem is they're in a holding pattern. They've got no name. There's no chance for another stadium for 3-4 years now. So you talk about a destination point. Well, Dan Snyder's not going to dump $10 million into fixing facilities that, or more that they may not have. So that's why you're looking at old, tired practice facilities, that need so many upgrades all over the place that you're just not going to see for a couple of years. And that's frustrating.
Yeah, I mean, let's remember our stadium has been in the news for not the best reasons. If you go on social media, some stuff happening to some fans there that was not worth the price of admissions. I think you're so right on that, Doug. Sorry, Glenn, to cut you off, but great point.
No, but no, if you again, it goes back to winning. If you don't have a winning product, nobody's coming out. If you look at the Washington teams who have won championships in the last 5 years, you had the Washington Nationals who won. Fans will come out. You have the Capitol who won. Fans will come out. Even when the Washington Wizards were moving in the right direction, fans will come out. With this Washington
Mystics.
Mystics.
Don't forget the Mystics, baby.
When the Mystics won the championship, fans start to come out. This Washington football team has not put a product on the field that people want to see. Again, we've taken the division title at 7-9 as a product. Again, it's a losing season. Any way that you look at it, it's a losing season that just happened to win the NFC East. So the fans are not going to come out. You don't build new stadiums for losing teams, right? You build new stadiums for teams and get money because the revenue has to be coming from somewhere. All right, season ticket holders are not buying season tickets to the FedEx Field like they want to. So what has to happen? Ron Rivera and his staff has realized if they want to pack the stadium, or if they want Dan to move quicker into putting the stadium someplace, they have to have a winning product on the field. And the only way that you get a winning product is through free agency in the draft. This team has $60 million, right? $60 million in cap to try to find some free agents. Will and deal, wine and dine, whatever you need to do legally, right? to bring people to Washington to get it done. Because at the end of the day, it's about the product on the field. If this team right now, if you tell me if this team was 10-6 and we already had a playoff spot locked up, it will be there. Because the last playoff time when they had Green Bay come to town years ago, that stadium was rocking. So again, Washington football team has to put a winning product on the field, and they need to do so through free agency and then the draft. Free agency first.
And they tried. Sorry, Kelsey. To your point, they've tried in free agency. It's not for a lack of try. Remember, it was supposed to be Fitzpatrick, and the national media was really high on the explosiveness of the Washington offense that could have been. They went out and got Curtis Samuels. Now, whether he was healthy when they signed him or not, sounds like he wasn't. But they tried for Stafford. It's not that they don't realize what they need. They've tried to fix it. They just haven't been able to do it yet.
Yeah. Go ahead, Glenn.
No, go ahead, Kelsey.
I'm going to say, I think it's great points. And again, thinking of Washington as a destination point, I think you're right, Glenn, winning ways. We're talking about these different quarterbacks that might be available. People talking about Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson, or even we can look at with Tom Brady, went to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. You want to go to a team that has a promise, something that you can work towards. And right now, if I'm a veteran player, I don't know if Washington's going to be the best career choice for me to actually do something, all right, with my career and actually, again, begin to start winning. Doug, you bring up a great point. Last year, let's just not even think about the Washington football team. Last year, the whole NFC East was the laughing stock of the league for the play that was happening within the NFC East. Like, it was just that bad. But again, finally, Taylor Heineke, I think, gave hope when we talk about a next man up mentality. He stepped up, and even though he lost in that wild card game to the Buccaneers, he gave us hope because finally we saw a guy that nobody really knew finally step up. And I think this is what the Washington football team needs. Yes, you can use free agency, and you're hoping that the pieces fit. There are many people that wish Curtis Samuel fit, but right now we have many questions about Curtis Samuel and all these inactives and what he was supposed to be. But also you think about the guys in the right system. And I think also right now, Washington, you think about the guys that are shining and accelerating. Terry McLaurin is a great example of what can be great in Washington. But even him, I'd say, because he's playing in Washington, he doesn't get the fair shine that he deserves as a top receiver in the National Football League. So again, we can go through all these different scenarios. I do think winning is the key, but winning right now is going to take time with the pieces that Washington has. And again, this is time that Washington just does not have. Once again, reminding folks, the Washington football team, there's a whole new generation, folks, of kids that are growing up here that are talking about, hey, what are you guys talking about? The greatness days of Washington, because they just haven't seen it. That's what we want to get back to in Washington. I like that he brought up the turf as well. Too many injuries, too, that we've seen at FedEx Field. And I think we all know that. So, I mean, there's just so many different things that you get into. But again, lots has to start changing in Washington for us to finally, once again, be proud of this team. And yes, once again, fill seats within the new stadium.
You know, I want to add to that Scary Terry comment that Woolley is talking about. I don't think he will be in Washington much longer.
Because why?
I don't think so. I think when contract time comes up, unless they franchise tag him, I don't think he will be in Washington much longer. I think he's not that he's disgruntled with Washington, but he can see where there's greener pastures on the other side. And I think there's green pastures on the other side. So I think with Scary Terry being in Washington, it may not be much longer. But this Washington organization can be successful. I think Ron is changing the culture slowly. And I know some will say, well, you know, you didn't have a Chase Young and you didn't have a Montez Sweat and then COVID hit and you had players, you had played a game with 20-some players out and all this thing. But we got to realize, too, at the beginning of the year, Washington was one of those teams where I believe at one point 60 to 7% of their players were not vaccinated. 60 or 70% of the players. Ron Rivera even came out and said he was disgusted at the number that his team had of being vaccinated. So, I mean, you got to look. So some of this is self-inflicted. And that was my point. Some of this is self-inflicted on the Washington franchise and the Washington football team.
All right, my bad. I had some issues. Y'all can hear me now, right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Well, winning matters. That's what I was going to say, because in New England, the owner had some issues, but you don't hear a whole lot about it. We've had Deflategate, a number of Spygate, number of problems off the field, but you don't hear too much about it because they win. And they don't always have well, they did have the biggest star in football for a while, not just sports in general, but still, winning matters. And I'm hoping that this Washington football team can get back to their winning ways. Doug, what can we expect? Misery Monday? Is that what the show is going to be called again tomorrow? What can we expect on the Big Douglas show?
I have run out of bad words that start with an M, so we've just got to stuck with misery. But yeah, we'll be on there. Pooh and Chris should be on. It's been great to have Chris on. It gives you insight into the, we could break down the tape and all the stuff, but it's been nice to have the player perspective on, kind of what some of this stuff is. So his insights are always great, and we'll have some fun and chop it up and try not to be too sad.
Kelsey, you can share your platform. What can we expect from the Listen In with K&N show coming up?
Yeah, so I'm excited. We're kicking off a brand new year. Have lots of former football greats joining me on the show. So better believe we'll be talking about the Washington football team and lots more, and the playoff implications. And we'll also be talking about the team across the Beltway, the Baltimore Ravens. So be sure to check that out. So coming to you all Thursday at 6 p.m. Eastern time. Yes, we're going to be talking about those going for twos that John Harbaugh did for the Baltimore Ravens. And then also looking forward to, of course, on Masson this week joining Tony McGee's Pro Football Plus. Better believe there will be a lot said as well about this game and the implications for this Washington football team, and where do we look to next? I think that's the big questions everyone's asking. But to be quite frankly with you, Ray, I'm tired of asking that question. I feel like we're asking this question too many times after Washington football team season. So hopefully soon we get the right answer, and you can keep that answer so it's right.
I'll be checking you both out, Doug. I'm interested just to continue to hear what Chris has to say about the culture of the franchise since he played there. Because you hear so many stories from Trent and other former players. And some, who are in the media right now, I'm going to just say Brian Mitchell, I throw his name being one. He always says, if you knew what I knew, he never throws out there what is, quote unquote, really going on.
Chris said they didn't bring in ice tubs, like professional ice tubs, until Robert got hurt. They literally jumped into cold tubs with bags of ice before Robert got hurt.
Oh, my God.
There were 6 training tables when he got there.
Wow. Glenn, culture matters. We're going to be talking about the offseason coming up. Go ahead, bro.
Culture matters, but we don't know, as Kelsey said, does Ron have the time to change the culture? As a coach who had to come into a program and change the culture, honestly, it takes about 5 years to change the culture of a program, and he just doesn't have that much time.
Wow. All right, well, I'm looking forward to it. Hopefully we can get back together before the start of next season. Doug, we did the draft show last year. We also talked about Ryan Kerrigan's return. That was lackluster. I didn't want to mention it necessarily, but hey, it happened.
That's true. Nobody's even talking about that. It's such a good point, and it's so true. No one's even talking about that. And really,
only thing he did was cheer at the end of the game, and they showed like a quick glimpse of Ryan Kerrigan hugging the coach.
That's all we got. That's all we got. And really quick, I do also want to point out, remember the comments this week that were made by Orlando Scandrick about his time in Washington. So again, Washington continuing to be in the news. And again, culture plays a large part of what matters. Guys have to buy into the culture that you're selling for them to want to join the team. Now, again, RG3's book, I mean, there's so much happening with the Washington football team, but not the stuff that we should be talking about. We should be talking about them winning and playing good football. And right now, we're not doing enough of that, but it's because we're not seeing it.
I'm not going to shave till the Washington football team wins. How about that, right?
It'll look like this. It'll look like this by the time we talk again.
Glenn, come on, Glenn, let's do it. Don't shave until they have a winning season.
Till they have a winning season? Shoot, I'm gonna have grandkids by then.
Oh, wow. See, I told you. Listen, the voice of the fan is real. The optimism is not there. I hear all the positives, but right now, this is how we're feeling. And Kelsey, she's been mentioning Baltimore, but hey, I'm always in the Baltimore area. And let me tell you, they want Harbaugh gone, even though to me, he's established a great culture. It's crazy, man. You cannot please fans. So
I don't blame Harbaugh. I don't blame Harbaugh for going for 2. And I'm not on anybody's show. He should have went for 2 both times. It's not everybody blame Harbaugh for going for 2. Nobody wants to blame Lamar Jackson for throwing a short pass. Mm-hmm. Nobody wants to blame you make a great play as a defensive player by J.J. Watt to make Lamar Jackson have to throw the ball quicker than normal. So it's a lot of things. You go for 2 in that situation, get off the field with injuries coming from a guy who's a coach. So you go for 2. If he gets those 2-point conversions, everybody calls him a genius.
Yeah. See, I felt differently about the 2-point conversion, but y'all will have to tune into the show. But
again, we're going to check you out.
John Harbaugh has been a proven coach in Baltimore. I'm not calling for his ass, but I think John Harbaugh is kind of like getting the same heat that Mike Tomlin for some reason always gets. Again, 2 established great coaches. And yes, they've had seasons that, of course, you would love to change, but we talked about COVID-19 and injuries on this show, and that has impacted teams this season as well. So you can't, of course, forget that. But yeah, it's just – John's going to have something to talk about, though, again, because you think about those games, and I hear you, Glenn, but those might have 2 wins, might have had Baltimore in a different position, but luckily for Baltimore, the AFC North is still pretty interesting right now.
All right, well, I appreciate you for joining us, Kelsey, Big Doug, Glenn. You know it's always real. We got some plans coming up. All Burgundy and Gold Everrrything, the Urban Sports Team, catch us every week. Typically on Wednesdays is when that show premieres, and, of course, the Urban Sports Team podcast each and every Tuesday, 8 p.m., live. Check us out on every platform: Stitcher, TuneIn, Spotify, Google Play. What is it? Apple Podcast. We're everywhere. And of course, listen to you all. We're on every platform. But again, thanks for joining us. Washington football team. I'm not shaving till you win. Hey, we're out of here. Thanks again for listening. Check us out this week.